Love without losing yourself. A Stoic guide to emotional balance. The fire that burns but does not consume. How to love without being controlled by emotion. I want you to picture something. You're in love, the kind of love that makes the world feel lighter. Where even the smallest moments, sharing a coffee, a lingering glance, the warmth of their presence, feel like eternity compressed into a single heartbeat. It's intoxicating, it's exhilarating, but one day, something shifts. Maybe they pull away slightly. Maybe they change. Or maybe, you change. And suddenly, what was once a source of joy becomes a storm inside you. Doubts. Fears. A desperate need to hold on. This is where most people lose themselves in love. But what if I told you that love should never be a chain? What if love was never meant to be something you own, control, or cling to? What if, instead of drowning in it, you could become a lighthouse, shining with warmth, guiding, but never losing yourself in the tides? That's what the Stoics understood about love. And if you master this, you will not only love more deeply, but you will love with a kind of power that never breaks you. So let's begin. Imagine Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in Rome, writing in his journal by candlelight. The emperor, with absolute control over an empire, still wrote to remind himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. This is the foundation of everything. Love, real love, should never be about control. Not over the other person, and not over the outcome. But that's where most of us get it wrong. Think about it. Why do relationships cause so much suffering? Because we attach ourselves to illusions that the other person must stay the same. That they must always love us the way we want. That we must never feel uncertain or insecure. But the Stoics remind us of something that modern relationships often forget. Nothing is permanent. Everything changes. Seneca wrote, "What need is there to weep over parts of life? The whole of it calls for tears." But he wasn't telling us to be sad. He was telling us to embrace this truth. Life, love, people, everything flows like a river. You can either try to grasp the water and suffer as it slips through your fingers, or you can let it flow, adapting with it, without losing yourself. So let me ask you, if you could love someone without fear, without the desperate need for them to always be yours, how much freer would you feel? Let's get practical. Imagine you're deeply in love, but you start noticing small changes. They seem distant. They don't text back as quickly. Maybe they seem less interested. The default reaction for most people? Anxiety, panic, the mind races. What if they don't love me anymore? What if I did something wrong? What if they're seeing someone else? Stop, right there. The Stoics would ask you, what exactly do you control? Can you control how they feel? No. Can you force them to stay? No. What can you control? Yourself. So instead of spiraling, ask yourself, what am I afraid of losing? If the answer is, them, then look deeper, because the real fear isn't losing them, it's losing the way they make you feel about yourself. And that is a sign that you've placed your happiness outside of yourself. Epictetus said, wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. Love works the same way. True love isn't about possessing someone, it's about giving without demand. Without needing them to complete you. You are already whole. Let's test this philosophy with a scenario. Suppose your partner tells you they need space. The emotional reaction might be panic. Why? What did I do? What does this mean? But the Stoic response? Accept and reflect. Instead of reacting, you pause, you breathe, and you remind yourself, they are a free individual. Just as I am, their feelings are theirs, not mine to control. If they need space, I will give it freely. Because love is not about clinging, it is about trust. This doesn't mean you suppress emotions. It means you observe them, understand them, but you do not let them rule you. Imagine two people standing in the rain. One fights against it, angry that it's ruining their day. The other simply lifts their face to the sky and walks forward. The rain is the same, but the experience? Completely different. So I ask you, in love, do you fight the rain, or do you walk with it? Now, you might be thinking, but isn't this too cold? Shouldn't love be passionate, fiery, all-consuming? The Stoics would say, yes, but only if you are the master of the fire. Not consumed by it. Love is not the enemy. Emotion is not the enemy. The enemy is attachment to illusions, expectations that turn love into suffering. Think of a flame. If you hold it too tightly, it burns you. If you try to control it, it suffocates. But if you respect it, if you let it breathe, it gives warmth, light, and life. This is love. And this is what it means to love without losing yourself. So let me leave you with this question. If you were to lose everything tomorrow, your partner, your comforts, even your identity, who would you be? Because the answer to that question is the foundation of unbreakable love. Now, do you want to go deeper? Unshakable love amidst the storm, mastering emotional balance with stoic clarity. Imagine standing in the eye of a hurricane. The winds rage around you, uprooting trees, tearing through everything in their path. But right where you stand, absolute stillness. Imagine bringing that same calm into love. Not detachment, not apathy, but a profound steadiness that no heartbreak, no rejection, no uncertainty can shake. This is what the Stoics teach us, to love fully, fiercely even, but to remain centered within ourselves. Because when love is tested, and it will be, what keeps it alive is not blind passion, but clear vision. Let's talk about one of the greatest fears in love, loss. The fear that one day, the person you love might leave, change, or hurt you. This fear often drives us to control, to demand constant reassurance, or to sacrifice our own needs just to keep them close. But Epictetus would remind us, don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do, and you will go on well. This isn't about surrendering to fate. It's about realizing that love, like life, is uncertain, and fighting that uncertainty only creates suffering. But accepting it, that creates freedom. Think about it. How much of your anxiety in love comes from trying to predict the future? Will they always love me? Will we always be happy? What if something changes? But here's the truth. You don't know. You never will. And that's okay. The Stoic response isn't to ignore these fears, but to face them head on. What if they do leave? What if the relationship ends? Instead of running from these questions, the Stoic asks, and then what? If your happiness depends entirely on someone else, then losing them feels like losing yourself. But if your happiness comes from within, from your own character, values, and inner peace, then even loss cannot break you. Now let's apply this. Imagine you're deeply in love, but one day, your partner seems distant. The panic sets in, but instead of spiraling, you stop. You ask yourself, what am I fearing? The answer might be loneliness, rejection, or the pain of losing them. But here's the challenge. Can you sit with that fear without trying to escape it? Marcus Aurelius wrote, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. So you acknowledge your fear, but you don't let it dictate your actions. You don't beg for attention. You don't sacrifice your dignity. And you don't become someone you're not just to keep them close. Instead, you remain calm, present, and authentic. And something remarkable happens. Your love becomes stronger. Not because you controlled the other person, but because you mastered yourself. Here's a scenario to challenge you. Imagine your partner tells you they're unsure about the relationship. Most people would panic, bargain, or break down. But a Stoic response? I understand. Take the time you need. My love doesn't come with chains. Sounds impossible? Maybe. But imagine the strength it takes to say that. Imagine the freedom. Because love isn't about forcing someone to stay. It's about giving them the space to choose you freely. Seneca wrote, he suffers more than necessary who suffers before it is necessary. Most of our suffering in love doesn't come from actual events, but from our imagined fears. The Stoic approach is radical. Face your worst fears. Accept them as possibilities, and then let them go. What remains is clarity. So let me ask you, if you knew you could survive any heartbreak, would you love differently? Let's talk about boundaries. Love without losing yourself means knowing where you end and the other person begins. It means giving generously, but not to the point where you lose your own identity. Imagine you're in a relationship where you constantly bend to the other person's needs, sacrificing your own dreams, time, and values just to keep them happy. The Stoics would call this a form of slavery, not to the other person, but to your own fears and desires. Epictetus reminds us, "No man is free who is not master of himself." In love, this means setting clear boundaries, not out of selfishness, but out of self-respect. You can love someone deeply, but still say no when something compromises your values. You can be there for them, but still prioritize your own well-being. And here's the paradox: the more you respect yourself, the more your love is respected. The more you maintain your own integrity, the more you inspire trust and admiration. But it's not easy. Love tests us. What do you do when your partner's needs conflict with your own? The Stoic answer is brutally honest. You choose your integrity. Every time. Because love built on self-betrayal is not love. It's a slow erosion of your soul. Now, imagine facing betrayal. Perhaps the ultimate test of love and emotional balance. Betrayal shatters us because it feels like a personal attack, not just on our relationship, but on our sense of self. But the Stoics would ask, is it truly the betrayal that hurts? Or is it your interpretation of it? Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. You can't control someone else's actions, but you can control your response. And your response defines who you are. So when betrayal happens, the Stoic path is not to retaliate or wallow in self-pity. It is to grieve, yes, but also to reflect. What can I learn from this? How can I grow stronger? Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Even heartbreak, when faced with wisdom, becomes a path to greater strength. So ask yourself, if every heartbreak was a lesson, not a failure, how would that change the way you love? Let's end this part with a challenge, for the next week. Observe your emotions in love. When fear arises, acknowledge it but don't act on it. When you feel the urge to control, step back, and when you feel joy, embrace it fully without clinging to it. Because to love without losing yourself is not a destination, it's a practice. Every day, every moment. The art of loving freely, becoming unbreakable in love through Stoic mastery. Imagine love as a bird perched on your open palm. If you grip too tightly, you crush its spirit, but if your hand remains open, it stays, not because it has to, but because it chooses to. This is the essence of Stoic love, not possession, but presence, not control, but connection. In this final part, we explore how to integrate all these principles into daily life, creating a love that is both boundless and unbreakable. Let's begin with a truth that many fear. Love is never guaranteed. No matter how much you give, how deeply you feel, or how tightly you hold on, love remains uncertain. This uncertainty terrifies most people. But for the Stoic, it is liberating. Epictetus famously said, "When kissing your child, say to yourself, 'Tomorrow he may die.'" At first glance, this sounds harsh, even cruel, but it's not about fostering pessimism, it's about appreciating what we have. Fully, without illusions. Imagine applying this to love. Every moment with someone you love becomes infinitely precious because you are aware that it could end at any time. And because you accept this truth, you cherish them more deeply, without the burden of fear. Ask yourself, if you loved as if every moment might be the last, how differently would you love? Now, let's talk about jealousy, a common poison in relationships. Jealousy arises from a fear of loss, from the belief that someone else can take away what we hold dear. But the Stoics would argue, how can someone take from you what you do not own? You do not own your partner. Their love is not a possession. It is a gift, freely given each day. When you realize this, jealousy fades, because you understand that love is not something to guard, but something to experience fully while it lasts. Imagine watching the sunset. You don't try to hold on to it. You don't panic as the light fades. You simply enjoy its beauty, knowing it will return. Love, like the sunset, is most beautiful when we let it be. Let's go deeper. What happens when love challenges your sense of self? What if your partner's dreams, needs, or values clash with yours? The Stoic answer is clear: compromise when possible, but never at the cost of your core self. Seneca teaches us, to be everywhere is to be nowhere. If you stretch yourself thin trying to be everything for someone else, you lose yourself. True love respects boundaries. It allows room for two individuals to grow, side by side, without merging into one indistinct form. Imagine two trees growing close together. Their branches may intertwine, their roots may share the same soil, but each remains its own entity. This is healthy love, love that nurtures growth, not dependency. So ask yourself, are you losing yourself in love, or are you growing within it? Let's confront one of the hardest truths. Sometimes, love ends. Even the most passionate, the most profound relationships can fade. The Stoic response to this reality is not to avoid love, but to love fully without attachment. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart." This is the paradox. Love deeply, but hold lightly. Give everything, but expect nothing in return. Not because you are indifferent, but because your sense of self does not depend on another's presence. Imagine being in love but knowing that if it ends, you will not break. You will grieve, yes, but you will not lose yourself. Because your happiness, your peace, and your identity are rooted within you. Practical Stoic exercises for love. Negative visualization. Spend a few minutes each day imagining life without your partner. Not to cause sadness, but to foster gratitude. When you see how precious their presence is, you love more deeply without taking them for granted. The dichotomy of control. Whenever anxiety arises in love, ask yourself, what is within my control? Focus only on that. Let go of what you cannot control. Daily reflection. Each night, reflect on your actions in love. Were you true to yourself? Did you act out of fear or love? What can you improve tomorrow? Amor fati. Love your fate. Whatever happens in love, joy, heartbreak, uncertainty, embrace it as a necessary part of your journey. Let's end with a powerful thought experiment. Imagine you are at the end of your life, reflecting on all your relationships. What kind of love would make you proud? Love that was desperate and controlling, or love that was free, generous, and unshakable? The Stoics believed that our greatest power lies in how we respond to life. In love, this means embracing every moment fully, but never losing ourselves in it. It means giving freely without chains, loving without fear, and standing tall even when love challenges us. So I leave you with one final question. If love is both the greatest joy and the greatest test of our inner strength, are you ready to face it with Stoic grace?